Taking a seat. Thank you, friends. Thank you, Jordan. Stop asking me that. All right, friends. I'm actually not going to be up here much, but I am going to be kind of our host as we go through the rest of the day and want to set that up. One, just really appreciate this morning the chance to be in prayer and worship together and the chance to hear from Chad. And I think, like last night, hearing from Angie and thinking about Zeke and Austin and Joe, and that's why we're all in the room. It's why our teams all do what they do. And I think about all of these things that Chad just talked about, and I don't ever want to forget why we're doing it. The names of the kids and the pictures of their faces, and I always want to encourage our staff to never forget that. And I think all of us, this is why you do what you do. I just want to care for and help our staff do what they do. And then we want to try and take care of these incredible places that we get to be at and get to have. And then partner with our field friends. And that's the work ahead of us. But then and Chad acknowledged this, as we think about all of the things he just shared, the goals and the priorities and these huge questions in the mission and these huge questions with our staff and our operations and financial, and it quickly becomes a lot. And that doesn't even, and Chad acknowledged this, that doesn't even talk about like just day to day. What is it like to lead our teams and try and love them really well? It's complicated. And for me, I can just tell you, as Chad talked about plenty, when I look at all of that and try and sit in a room and solve it, I don't feel plenty because I don't have the answers. Maybe a few things, I have some ideas, but I pretty quickly need to pick up a phone. I don't feel plenty. Where I feel plenty is this room, or when I get to be with our staff. That's where I go, okay, I think we can figure this out. Probably about 10, 12 times this year, some of you have sent staff to me for conversations. Or sometimes it's just been staff calling me. I think they see my name on some random email and go, well, I'll call this guy. And it's always great. It's an honor to have these conversations. And generally it's things that maybe there's some confusion or frustration that they want to talk through on an issue. Sometimes it's not even an issue I'm really in charge of, but that's okay. And I think, these conversations typically go pretty similar. Me listening, me asking some questions, hearing them, and then at the end of the conversation, inviting them to, okay, would you be willing over the next couple months just to keep a list of, as you're doing your ministry, doing your work, what are the things that on this issue that you brought up, what are the things that pop up for you that go, why do we do like that? Or what if we did this? Or like whatever those things are for you that pop in your brain that you think, am I allowed to ask that or say that? Keep that list. And in a few months, could we talk again? And man, I'd love to talk about that list with you. Not all of them have called me back or emailed me back. A couple of them left staff. That's okay. But some of them have. And the things that they have shared are directly impacting the work Jordan and I are doing. And it's just, there's learning in there. And it's in those conversations that I start to feel plenty and go, this is how we're going to move our way forward in what we're doing. So as we start to get into this next bit, and we'll look at kind of our dashboard from the strategic work here, I think that's the posture I've been trying to hold, because I look at all these things and go, how many times did Chad say, we might need to think differently? What needs to change? What needs to stay the same? What are some things that are core to us that we've forgotten and we need to get back to? All of those things, I think that's the good hard work in front of us. And so as we talk about strategic plans and priorities and goals and all of those things, what we're really talking about is how do we do this together to impact these things? And so just as a reminder of where we ended last spring, you can go to the dashboard or the next slide. So we had this call in the spring where we looked at this, and this was kind of the culmination of our survey work, all the focus groups, the interviews. It represented a lot of listening to you and our teams, which is deep listening and, again, just an honor to hear from our staff. And so we went here, and we have our charism at the top, our values, a pain point, and then these 5 shifts that got identified. A missional shift, relationship with field from support to partnership, wanting more partnership. And I would also just say, maybe not all of these words are the exact right words. That's okay. I think the heart of it is what we need to be talking about. We have the priority shift, from everything as a priority to clear missional priorities. A staff development shift, from passive expectations to intentional investment. A cultural shift, from sacrificial perfectionism to hospitality and sustainability. And a leadership shift, from top-down to shared accountability and collaboration. And so out of those, we had these 3 initiatives that Chad shared: executing on clear priorities, prioritizing the thriving of our people, and becoming full partners in the gospel ministry. So after our call in the spring, we split the CLT and a few others into 3 teams, working on these 3 kind of working groups that we call them. And they've been doing a lot of work, and they've been meeting, you're about to hear updates from them. The first thing they did was just kind of go, okay, what are technical solutions out there right now that we can identify and just go do? And they started making that list and going, okay, what are some things we can work on? And a few of those were really big, and want to acknowledge those. One of those was the compensation effort that happened in August. There was a team of people that did a deep dive into both job ranges, pay ranges for certain job titles, and actual pay. And so in August, in late August, we had 25, I think, somewhere in there, job titles that went up in pay range, some going up multiple pay ranges. And then we had a significant portion of our staff receive increases that were warranted. That was a huge direct response from what we heard in the survey. And I think represents leadership listening and doing a lot of work, and I think wouldn't have happened without the process we had went through. Is it the answer? No, but it certainly helps and builds a lot of trust and shows that leadership is trying to listen. I think some other ones that I would point out, and obviously I wasn't involved in that one, obviously I'm involved in these, is the learning catalog. We read about staff development and to go, would we have done a learning catalog? Probably, but it's very different based on what we heard in the process. Very different. There are specific things in there for people. There's things we're trying, some experiments in there, types of learning that we put in there based directly on the survey. There's things, development in terms of leadership and supervision that we see on there. There's specific development when it comes to female staff, when it comes to staff of color. And so I think there's some ways in there that is a direct response from what we heard from our staff. And then the other one I would say is onboarding. The onboarding tool that we launched in August, I would say, is a first step in trying to have a clear development path for our staff. And you've heard me say this, I mean, when I took this role and had conversations with a lot of people in this room, the number one thing I heard about was onboarding, because we had such a staff turnover, and all of these new staff coming in, and very quickly we learned, our culture, the relational culture we relied upon to do this training no longer works. We need a different system. So all of those big technical fixes are good and build trust. Again, they are not the answer long term, but they are important. And so these working groups have been wrestling with these more adaptive questions, trying to learn what are the deeper issues, how do we learn our way towards progress. I'll be honest, we could spend the rest of the day just doing updates from the working groups because they've been meeting a lot. We could do that. We're not going to do that. They're each going to have about 15 minutes to give you a snippet of, here's how we've been wrestling with this, here's what's bubbled to the surface, here's some wonderings we have, and here's kind of where we see the next bit of work going. And so that'll be kind of the next hour, is those updates. And we'll do that, and we'd love for you to engage with them and ask questions even after the time they have been deep into this work. After lunch, you're going to hear a little bit more about those three kind of healthy operation, healthy ministry, healthy people that Chad had in his goals. And Eric's going to talk about that. And that's a little bit of how the CLT has been just holding all of this. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're really kind of going to get to work together to go, how do we all start to enter into this work? So I'm excited for that time. So we're going to start with an update from the priorities team, which actually I'm a part of, but Eric's going to be, it's Eric, Kathleen, and I, and Eric's going to give us an update on that. So.
Awesome. Okay, Dan mentioned Kathleen. He and I have been meeting over the summer and throughout the fall, and excited to give you a little update on what we've been learning and wrestling with. So obviously that initiative is executing on clear priorities. That is the challenge before us. And I think we've been well set up to acknowledge the breadth and depth of information that heads our way, and how do we do that effectively. So let's see here. Do you mind putting up that grounded from what we heard? Thank you so much. There is a lot on the slide. The point of the slide is to say these are statements pulled directly from the focus groups. And it's not just one focus group. The top left side that you see there is actually the overall summary and comments. There's comments from department heads, and then there's comments from tenured non-department head staff. So this idea of priorities are not clear is throughout the depth of our org charts. And I do want to read the overall summary on the top left. It captured it this way. Prioritize sustainable systems and clear expectations. Staff are asking camping leadership to slow down, understand their realities, streamline initiatives, clarify expectations, and prioritize. There's a deep fatigue from numerous organizational changes, and there's an expressed desire for sustainable strategic alignment over reactive decision-making. Lots of good words in there. Chad, I think your comments this morning echoed that pace of how the MLT desires to lead, and how do we as camping leadership model and embody that as well. So I just wanted to start there. That's what we know to be true. Let's go to the next slide here. Again, we're putting it in front of you a bunch of times. The shift there is to execute on clear priorities. And I really think several of the adaptive shifts that the transformation team called out apply in this space. So I wanted to read them again. Dan read them. I think it's worth hearing them again. The priority shift is everything is a priority to clear missional priorities. I really think there's an element of this cultural shift that we need to wrestle with in the priority space, which is from sacrificial perfectionism to hospitality and sustainability. And then that leadership shift from top down to shared accountability and collaboration. So as we've been having these conversations, we're trying to have them in light of these three areas. Are we really thinking of experimenting our way forward and learning in these three areas? Okay, so let's get to the meat of some of what we've done here. So next slide. All right, so learning. The current volume and method of leadership inputs to prioritize our overwhelming staff. And then contrast that with successful organizations often anchor in two key areas. They use a strategic framework to set priorities, and they cascade priorities through the organization. You can imagine, and we're still learning, but what a gift that the MLT spent 3 days wrestling on behalf of the mission to actually come out with a slide deck, even though it's been updated, around what are the mission's priorities and operational plan for the next 3 years. So even this conversation has shifted from where we started in May and June of this year to go, well, actually, I think we have a better shot of aligning with mission priorities. The MLT put in the time and wrestled through what are those things that are going to make it through that phase gate for the next 3 years. So these are some things we're learning. Obviously, communication and partnership between camping services and camps is critical. And then we've learned through some experiments that, monthly communication to this room isn't sufficient. There needs to be additional communication to the department head level on certain key operational things. So I just want to call those out. All right, the next slide here. Okay, let me talk about the graphic first. I mentioned earlier, successful organizations do two things. They have a strategic framework. So in the spirit of experimentation, Jordan and Kathleen spent 90 minutes saying, okay, if we can envision a framework, who would be the key folks? And let's look at, and again, this is just like absolute, you don't need to pay, like we were just drafting what could a visual look like that would hold a strategic framework for a given period of time. So that's what the visual is. And then what I would call out on the left-hand side, a couple things we've tried. This year we did end of summer department surveys a little different. So I rallied the team that I lead and we had a conversation. Okay, we're all gonna stack hands. We're doing an end of summer survey for every department. We want input on the front end that is gonna influence our priorities for the year ahead. So here's a couple, I asked the team, what'd you learn? Which was super fun. So like in the retail space, Kathleen was already aware that gift cards were a thing. That system was not humming along like we wanted it to, but it allowed her to move that to the very top of her list and change the timing of finding a solution for gift cards for next summer. In guest services, Matt heard a lot about training in the medical and AV space. So as he's onboarding into the director of guest services role, he's leaning in with the medical advisory board in a different way. He's prioritizing a relationship with Access Audio in a different way based on that feedback. In facility management, we've heard a lot about, we actually rely so much on volunteer labor. We need to be able to capture volunteer labor. And so that's accelerated how Chad and Aaron are thinking about capturing volunteer hours in MaintainX as we move forward. And that was late in the process, but we went, oh, that requirement's really key in the rollout. In admin, Emily, at the end of the summer, it was reaffirmed. She had this suspicion, but her strategic partnerships with other mission services departments really matters. She is going to lead differently in the year ahead with HR and EJ and the team there. She's going to lean in different with HR compliance things. So that was reaffirmed based on the survey. And certainly not last but not least, and this one surprised, I think, Sig and I both. As Sig went through the end of summer surveys with food service, Venna really popped up as a key tool that food service managers felt ill-equipped to use. So those are just some really practical examples of how that end of summer survey really changed or drove or reaffirmed what we thought to be true for the year ahead. So I was really grateful that folks stacked hands on that, and that is something we want to do on a more regular rhythm to hear from folks. Okay, the other thing that we just, we talked about one of the things we've learned is effective organizations cascade strategic priorities. Okay, the short list, by the way, in one draft I had like 25 bullet points, but for now I just kept national strategic things, divisional, camp, department, employee level goals for the year. You can keep the list going, right? HR has some goals for the year, risk management has some goals for the year, and those are direct, and those have a direct or an indirect impact on how you're able to execute on your priorities for the year. So we're just trying to get our arms around what would be all the pieces of the puzzle that need to be factored into a strategic framework in order to execute on clear priorities. Okay, last slide here, and I'm going to hand it off to the people group. Okay, you've experienced one of our experiments in your inbox. Maybe you've read it, maybe you haven't. That's okay, we're learning. Is that monthly communication from Camping Services. And this was just a fun one where SIG was courageous enough to be like, hey, I'm going to send out an email to camp managers about this. Is that okay? And I went, yeah, that's okay. And then in one of our team meetings, it bubbled up like, well, actually, in a week or two, I was thinking about sending, and we said, whoa, why don't we slow down, combine all of that into one place? So someone could sit at their desk in front of their inbox, look on their phone, and digest that. Okay, great. Here's some different things that are priorities for the month ahead in these given departments. Oh, I actually had, in some instances, okay, here's an actually practical action step of something I can ask in the next one-on-one with this leader on my team. So that's really been our goal there. You can imagine we're trying to think about the volume of emails that hit your inbox. We tried to think about the timing of that communication, who really is the intended audience, what is the method of that information. And then one of the most interesting things, a couple months in, we were kind of revisiting, how's it going? Do we think people are reading it? Are they talking about it? And even amongst our team, it was interesting to see, okay, wait, I'm writing these bullet points to be informative. And then half the team kind of said, well, I'm writing them to be action-oriented. And we went, oh, that's interesting. We didn't even talk about, is this informative or is this to drive action? Okay, if there's 40 bullet points in there and they're all action-oriented, we are actually just pouring more into the backpack, and that's not our intent. It's to be a tailwind to leaders in this room. So we've been wrestling with that. What is the right balance of informative versus action-oriented? And we've been wrestling with that. So let me see. And then the last two bullet points are just spaces that we want to continue to learn. What would be those regular rhythms that would empower camp staff to lead in their day-to-day? We're convinced, and it's going to take some work, that a really effective strategic framework matters to a chef 2 on a Tuesday. That's the desire, is that when we're getting clear and aligned on our priorities, it is going to help staff in their day-to-day, week-to-week jobs. They'll go, oh, I know why I'm doing this. Yeah, it's in support of this. In order to have a healthy operation, I desire to do a facility inspection at the end of each month in the kitchen. We wanted to make a difference there. So we're curious of how we can continue to refine in such a way that it makes an impact all the way down. And then really, we are really, really curious about this annual framework. What would that look like? When does it start? Who's the first domino to tip? And how do we align with one another as we do that? So I get to hand it off to the people group. Partnership. Fantastic. I can't wait to do that. So Megan, why don't you come on up? Excited.
We'll do Q&A at the end. Okay.
Let's give it up for Megan Vaught. Woo!
Friends, thanks for hanging in and leaning in. It's a joy to share a little bit about what we've been learning and what we've been wrestling with regard to partnerships. If you'll go ahead and put up that first slide, Levi, if you'd be so kind. a lot of words on here. I think what I want to start with is that to think about the shift that we have been wrestling with. The word becoming has been standing out to me. I know a little bit earlier we talked about that there are a lot of words and sometimes words don't matter, but I think that words really do matter. And the word that jumped out at me with regard to the shift is becoming. It's an active thing. And with regard to partnerships, there are two parties involved in partnerships, right? And so in the very beginning, we started talking about what this becoming full partners in the gospel ministry might look like. And we got really desperate and really frustrated because it's really like there are two responsible parties, but we're really only one of them. And there's a lot of responsibilities that are dependent on our field partners. And I just want to acknowledge that tension. We can't control how our field partners respond, but I do think that we have a responsibility, we have an opportunity to think about how we, as ministers of the gospel, are becoming partners with our field friends in this gospel ministry. So that was just kind of a waking thought that I had with regard to these partnerships. Some of the data, we also spent a fair bit of time spiraling transparently on the data, but some of the words on the slide that pop out at me and that helped to shape our work and our experiments, what we were wrestling with, were words like divide. That's a significant word. And I would venture that when I say that, you probably can, some thoughts about division with your field staff counterpart might come to mind. I think clarify roles is another word that jumped out from the data. Just not knowing, like, who am I in this space? Am I the implementer? Am I the operator? Am I the caretaker? These are words that come with weight. And if we don't understand how we are to show up in these spaces, and probably more significantly, if our field partners don't understand how we're showing up in these spaces, there's room for all sorts of, again, division or lack of clarity. I also think about, we've talked about this in many forms over the years, but it came out in a real poignant way with our data, with the camp staff surveys, that our people want to be considered part of the gospel ministry. We're not operators, we're not caretakers. We want to be seen and we want to show up as vital partners in the gospel ministry. Another word that popped out of the data for us is this idea of collaboration, that decision-making matters, that input matters. It's not just that we are recipients of decisions or implementers of decisions, but that those decisions and that posture matters, that we get to show up with our field staff friends. And finally, that all of this stuff, how we show up, what we do, the decisions that we make, how we're seen, how we move through camp with our field staff partners is not assumed, that there's clarity, that there's words and definition. I think we could all agree that those are high callings, those are heavy lifts, and we sought to experiment or just do some learning around some of those words and how we might operate differently, show up differently with our field staff partners. And the place where we did our experimenting this summer was in the camp space. That's obviously probably the first place that pops into our minds when we think about partnership with the field, is how we live and move and operate and pull off camp proclamation events at camp with our field staff partners. And so we sought out to dig into what do field and camp staff partnerships look like at camp in the summer. We kind of did 3 different experiments this summer because we're, high achieving and we get stuff done a lot. We get a lot of stuff done. But I would say I'm excited to share what I had the opportunity, the experiment that I had the opportunity to participate in this summer. I actually got an opportunity to be on assignment at Rockbridge Session 2. I was a head leader. I went to Rockbridge. I was head leader. I was head leader 3. So I was in charge, of course, of housing. I didn't, of course. This is so true. I could do it for 550 at a time, no big deal. So I was part of a head leader team. I was part of the camp staff team. I memorized the memory verse that our camp director asked us to memorize. I lived on camp. I went home occasionally on day 6 to just check in with my family. But I was a full-fledged member of the assignment team, and it was a joy. It was really hard. I got the gut bug at one point. It wasn't nearly as bad as Vomageddon at Lake Champion this summer, but I did get the gut bug, and I spent the day throwing up. Thank you, some sweet camper that gave me that bug. But I think more significantly, what I learned, we can switch to the next one. Sorry, one more. So what I learned on my assignment this summer, first of all, is that it can be done. The opportunity to participate in the assignment was kind of presented to me from our field staff partners. David Carter is our divisional ops manager, and Josh Griffin, our SVP, approached me. And it came out of a necessity. Like, the reality in the Eastern Division is, with the assignment teams, the number of assignments that we need to put together, we are having a hard time filling them. And so it arose out of that, being asked if I would consider that. And I said yes. And then it got me to thinking, this is one of those places where I can be really observant, like Chad talked about, notice things, and try to pay attention to just dynamics, just relationships as they're unfolding on camp staff, on camp in the summer. So I would say the first thing is that it is possible. It came at a cost, for sure. Came at a cost professionally, came at a cost personally, but it can be done. And I would even go so far as to say, within reason, it should be done. There was great value there. This also goes without saying, but it needs to be said out loud. Assignments for our field staff partners are a crucible. We see all kinds of stuff bubble to the surface when we live and work in community, close community. We see all sorts of stuff bubble to the surface, and there's all kinds of like mixed up dynamics and relationships and leadership lines, and all of that stuff kind of goes out the window when we come onto assignment, and only by the grace of God are we able to emerge from that unscathed or relatively unscathed. But I think what really that taught me was just the importance of empathy on our part as camp staff. It's in our DNA. We are hospitality geniuses. But if we can just think about and be motivated by that empathy, I wonder if our hospitality might deepen. And then I think that the most significant thing that I learned when I was on assignment is just this idea of, we did spend a lot of time prior to the assignment back in May, just really wrestling with and arguing about, like, what do we mean when we say partnership? And a couple slides ago, you'll get these slides at the end. A couple of slides ago, Matt really astutely, ingeniously came up with some words to describe partnership that we were hoping to observe over the summer. And one of the word that I really observed in living color over the summer is just this idea of transformation or transformative. What might it look like for us to show up in the summer and partner in a transformational or transformative way with our field staff friends? And transformative is along the way, right? It's ever evolving, it's ever deepening in development. We don't have it figured out, right? We're not fully formed, and neither are our field staff partners. So what might transformational partnership look like in the summer with our field staff friends? Some of the words that I would use to describe that I observed this summer in living color when I was at Rockbridge is that there's just this values-driven, deep collaboration. So again, collaboration was one of the things that we saw in the data that was lacking or that we wanted to see more of. And I saw that play out in specific ways this summer on camp at Rockbridge. There's also there are short-term benefits. It has to be transactional. I'm not saying that we have to throw out our GSD posture, but I think that transformation means a balance, or at least acknowledging the tension of transactional and transformational conversations, relationships. It starts from a place of trust. If you can build that transformational relationship ahead of time, we can get transactional and our relationships aren't going to be damaged. It happens out of necessity. A singular vision and purpose. Marshall's going to talk about this a little bit, how it played out with him as a camp manager this summer, working with camp directors. Having a singular vision is really critical. And friends, like I would venture that all of this is like, yeah, no, duh. But I think that it was important for me to go to camp and see it flesh out in order for us to say, you know, this is one way that we want to be, how we want to move with our field staff friends in the summer. Mutual curiosity is the thing that I saw. I saw a lot of learning. We did, at the recommendation of our SVP, our P1s across the Eastern Division this summer took a real hard look at their matrices, and they pulled stuff out. Like they scaled down in order to make more room for kids to play during free time. Talk to Jimmy about how that fleshed out at Rockbridge this summer. It was beautiful. But that wouldn't have happened had Jimmy and the rest of the camp staff team and the assignment team, it came at a cost for them as well. I mean, they had to kind of scrap their matrix in like February, but it played out in really beautiful ways, and it wouldn't have happened had those folks not been curious and willing to try something different and trust that their leader was on to something, that what he was asking them to do really did matter and was worth giving it a try. So I talked about trust, talked about candid conversations, constructive conflict. Again, you all know these things, but how can we, again, own what is ours to own, but come into these relationships? And I would say these transformational relationships, these partnerships, get to start before May. They probably get to start even before assignment team training. That means a little bit of work, a little bit of intentionality, but that's what we do, is approach things that are important with intentionality. So that's kind of what I learned this summer. I'm gonna hand it off to Marshall to talk about what he learned this summer.
Thanks, Megan. Okay, so I said in our group, I just did my job, and Matt corrected me that I didn't. I'm gonna stand in the middle now. Okay, but you're. I said it quite like that. Yeah.
Well, actually you did.
Okay. You said it in a way that was helpful to me to hear. I'm going to talk about, I don't know what my slide says actually. Oh, it's what I said for it to say. Okay, so a lot of these things are things that I try to do on an annual basis, sometimes with success with camp directors, sometimes not. But the overlying thing was I transparently invited them into this. Hey, this is something that we are looking at in camping. I'm inviting you in to think about the same thing alongside me. And that was really helpful because they understood when I suggested something or when they suggested something that had greater implications. It was not just me desiring to have someone from our staff lead a Devo at War Room or Talk, whatever you call it, or it wasn't just me wanting someone to speak at All Camp Worship. Again, those things have happened before because the camp director maybe presented that idea because they've seen it somewhere and liked it, or maybe I suggested it, but now we had a new layer of like, hey, this is in the framework of we want to be partners, we want people, we want our teams to see us as partners so that they emulate that as well. So a couple of the things that we did, and really this started in May, but I think January is worth kind of backdating and saying monthly calls with camp directors. Those, when I look back, the success of those started the success really in the summer. So the camp directors that I had really good conversations with starting in January, and I just looked at Stacy, and Cami Dill was one of like the greatest partner. She's on staff in the DFW area. But she, starting in January, she was all in. Yes, thank you for talking to me about this. Yeah, here's what I'm running into right now. What do you think about it? Like, it was immediate partnership. And when I invited her in, she was all in, had ideas, wanted to hear my ideas. Let's figure out how to do that. Reminded me of my ideas when I forgot them during the summer. Whereas my session 2 camp director, we talked, but those conversations often, something came up. I can't, let's reschedule. It's okay. Do you have anything on your mind? No? Okay. So that was kind of the nature of our calls. Well, that translated into summer too. Like our connection, even the invitation, he understood it, but it just wasn't quite the same partnership. We were partners. I want to be careful about that, but it just wasn't quite the same. One of the suggestions, I think it was from Megan, was what if we stood side by side? Not just, we're both going to kind of have components of the first meeting with all of our assigned team and camp staff, but we're actually going to be on the stage side by side, physical representation of partnership. And so we did that. And I can talk a little bit more about that. It was great with Cami, and it was awkward with the session 2 camp director. Night 1 leader meeting, instead of me being introduced to give my part, to be standing there together as the opening, which kind of is awkward too at times, but still, we were physically standing side by side as we welcomed leaders in and started the whole camp week. And again, with Cami, the second week, I went back to my normal behavior of being in the room and kind of standing off the stage, waiting for her to finish, the camp director to finish their thing and then introduce me. And after that, she was like, "Why did you do that? We're supposed to be, and it's, oh, okay, that's partnership." Whereas the session 2 camp director, longtime friend, he loves Sharp Top, I believe that, but he did not. He didn't think that was necessary. And at one point he said, as he introduced me, there are some amazing people, the caretakers of this place. And he was being complimentary, but there was a side of me that took that word, and I was like, caretaker. I'm not insulted by that, but is that the right word? Okay. You can be insulted for me. Other things that I mentioned these, but like war room signups, and even some camp directors that are like, "Hey, I know your people aren't going to be at all of them, and we're doing it by day, so you take the first stab and get your people that are going to be there on their day to sign up first, and then we'll fill in." I'm like, "Oh, that's very honoring. Thank you." And then making sure that our staff either spoke or provided worship, and that was really fun too, because our staff got really excited about it, tried a different concept. Micah led the Sharp Top family band. Wow, another morning. Hopefully somebody picks up that mantle. And in session 3 heard about it, and they're like, "We got to replicate what you did." So that's really fun that experiment passed on even without me talking about it. Okay, the final thing that I would just say in all of the I don't have to go through every point, but there was a positive correlation. Like what I was saying between Cami and session 2, really you could tell all of our staff felt what I felt. And I think it's a bit of how I hold myself and speak. And I was intentionally careful not to speak ill of session 2 because it wasn't bad. It just wasn't the same as session 1. But I think sometimes when you walk through the door with a bright posture, people follow that, and if you're just kind of like, "Yeah, it's fine," then people follow that too. And on both sides, for me and for the camp director. And so people felt that like, "Yeah, it's fine. It's not as good as session 1." And then session 3, we actually sessions 1 and 3, camp directors were friends and talked a lot, and so it kind of felt like we were coming back to that, and people were refreshed as we ended the summer. We know this, but camp director sets a tone for their whole team. Their language matters, and some of them come in. Megan talked about this. But some of our camp directors come in. They're like Angie. They get it. They're on board, and some just don't. And so, getting to be intentional starting in January was really helpful. So,
thanks, Marshall. Okay. I'm going to go really fast because we're going to keep this thing moving. I saw Dan looking at his watch. Okay, so those two did something at camp. I sent a Cognito form out, so there you go. Feel pretty good about that. But one of the things that we've talked about earlier is when our folks are talking about senior leadership, they're talking about their boss's boss. So I'm sitting in a seat going, that means department heads. So I sent the Cognito forms to department heads to find out how are they experiencing their summer when we think about their relationships with the field, with the assignment team. I jumped right past the camp manager because a lot of times in this room, we would say, hey, when the surveys came out, well, yeah, it's kind of hard at times. Actually, at our camp, we're doing really well. We get along really well with our field staff folks. They love us. We love them. There's not a problem. Well, it's not true because our camp staff folks said that wasn't the case. So I jumped past you all and went to your department heads and said, hey, what are you experiencing? I did it in the Western Division, and then it moved real fast to some other divisions, so I'm sorry about collateral damage, but that happens sometimes. I felt like I could do it with quite a few camps in the West, and I did. And what we heard, if you go, yep, there we go. Some of the things we heard from the department heads. One, it was really fun to get responses back from them. Really detailed first session, not much by the third session, which didn't surprise me at all. I should have expected that and really did. But I would say the first session and into the second session gave us some themes, and I would say some of the themes are training, which means some of the CLT members need to think about, hey, how are our SVPs thinking about training with our assigned teams and partnering with our camp staff, because there's some misses there, and we can help them with that. And that's really senior leadership, my position, helping in conversations with SVPs. I would say it moves from the session to session. What Marshall described is what our camp staff feel, our department heads and down. Like sometimes it's really good, and a lot of times first session is really good because we're able to build relationships, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Like I knew this too, but it was reaffirmed with our department heads. Hey, first session, easy to get to know people. You're building relationships. You have more time. Second session, third session feels really rushed. You have more energy in the third session. Second session can be a drag and be hard. We just need to be conscious of that with our folks and talking to them about, hey, it's second session. It's coming up. We need to be prepared because this is their only session, like they say, like week only. That's their only session there. So let's be prepared and not compare. That's the other thing that's really hard. I would say sometimes the communication piece does break down, and it's on both sides. We're feeling that, and that's something we talk about all the time. Communication is hard. We know that, folks, so we just try harder and make sure that we're doing it and make sure we're talking with our folks. And I would say what the feedback that I really did read into it is they appreciated being asked their thoughts and opinions on what was going on then. So I would say as a best practice for you all, whether we did this Cognito form again or not, I would encourage you to figure out something on how you get feedback from your department heads and give it to your coordinator of going, hey, here's some things we're learning at our camp that we should think about differently for the next year. And that's all I have. So you're welcome. And the next group is, I don't even know. Okay, people.
Thank you. Okay, Katie and I get to share about the people kind of team, and AJ is also on that team with us, and he is a little bit under the weather today, so not getting to be up here with us right now, but we're gonna start with that first slide, Levi, and grounded from what we heard. And again, this goes back, everyone kind of had this slide, we'll send it to you, but ultimately as Katie, AJ, and I started to meet and think about the thriving of our people, we really wanted to ground that in what we heard from them. So this is a smattering of quotes from focus groups and the staff survey data, and really some themes that kind of go throughout there, and hopefully you read them too before you came here. But we are thinking about a lot of different things in the people team of where do we start, of pace and sustainability, the work-life balance, training, staff development, spiritual formation,
the transparency within kind of leadership and how we're hearing from our leadership and connecting with them. And a lot of different topics fall into the thriving of our people as we dive into that data. So these are just a handful of quotes from that. And we've tried to really look at different topics and experiment with those a little bit.
One of the things we wrestled with is being the people group, how much it's like a Venn diagram of the priorities and the partnerships and going, okay, well, it's all about people. And so what were we going to focus on versus what the other teams were working on? If you'll go to the next slide, Levi, please. We found out of the 5 adaptive shifts, we were going to carry forward on 3 of them. So staff development shift from passive expectations to intentional investment, cultural shift from sacrificial perfectionism to hospitality and sustainability, and the leadership shift from top down to shared accountability for the sake of prioritizing the thriving of our people, which is one of our values that was on the dashboard Dan shared. In all of this and in the feedback that we've been sitting with, digesting, as we've been having conversations with staff throughout this time, it feels like there's almost an echo of Egypt, of we are overworked, everything's a priority, and we're locked up on just having to keep working, and we don't know how to say no. We don't feel permission to say no when we get more requests added. Keep working. We're exhausted. So how do we help our people move into a space of thriving? How do we as partners in the gospel become embodied image bearers of God who is unhurried and present and working at a sustainable, purposeful posture in partnership? So there's this beautiful invitation to move our people out of Egypt into being the child image bearers of God. And so it's exciting work to be a part of. We're going to move on to the experiments and things that we've been doing. I'm going to do the first one. We focused, part of the deal with the summertime, we were very cognizant that we don't want to do an experiment with a bunch of people where it's going to be interrupting or creating more rocks in the backpack in the middle of summer. We were very sensitive about how are we going to do learnings while I work for Chad in mission services. What can I do in the camping services, mission services space on behalf of our people to listen and learn? Jordan was at Crooked Creek and could have great conversations on site. And then AJ, as he moved all around the Midwest division. So it was interesting to see what we were learning. In the communication space, this is one of the places we dove into during the summer. First, we did a series of 3 encouragement emails from leadership. And one of the things we were doing with that was staff were saying, we want more connection with leadership, more transparency. We have a dynamic where some staff are saying, I am overwhelmed with the amount of communication, which you heard Eric talk about a little bit. We also heard some of our staff saying, we don't hear anything. We're starved for communication. And so the response to getting an email in your inbox from Chad was really interesting to see, and to see that we were also passing the baton for the voices of a more diverse group of leadership to be speaking to the camping department in the summer, to be encouraging them. That was another part of what we were doing, is getting a little bit more connection in a modality that doesn't interrupt what's happening at camp. People can open their inbox when it's convenient for them. And I think that's an interesting dynamic we're holding as a team, is how do we communicate with one another in a way that is helpful and is being received and retained? Is written communication effective for our department? How could we do our communication in a different way where people receive it, retain it, and it takes effect in the team? So we found that, this is no surprise, but the engagement with the 3 emails we sent from May, middle of the summer, and right at the end, Allison sent out an encouragement as we transitioned into school season. The open rate on those emails got less and less, even though it was coming from Chad Sievert with a little intro and then passing the baton to someone else on the CLT. Those didn't get opened as much as the summer went on. Not a surprise to us. And then at the end of the summer, we, with the August work to communicate about the upcoming compensation change, kind of interesting. I know this room, you all had a preview of what was coming. You saw the message, the FAQs. When we sent the whole department that message, 75% of the department opened that email, the one that went to everyone. So part of me goes, I wonder how many people already knew what that was and didn't open it, but we were a little surprised to see that 1 in 4 people in the department didn't open the announcement about the compensation changes and how loud that feedback had been. So that was an interesting observation from that work that we did.
And then Dan mentioned this earlier, is we're thinking about kind of experiments in relation to people, the learning and leadership offerings for this year. So many of them are kind of experiments. And so offering a learning catalog, really a part of kind of some of these technical solutions, ways, things that Dan and I were already doing, but are really so informed by our staff and what they said. And many of those offerings are also kind of experiments, and what can we learn from them? And I am really aware of that kind of in all of those different opportunities. And so tomorrow, Dan and I will share a little bit more about a few of those, but really trying to think about what are we offering in terms of opportunities to help our supervisors in their supervision of staff and how that impacts staff's engagement with our organization. Thinking about things like a silent retreat and this opportunity for spiritual formation and kind of those opportunities. Katie is leading a call on organization and time management, and a large part of that call is led from a space of how do we think about our priorities even, and how do we make priorities and manage kind of a to-do list from a very like daily basic 101, but hopefully giving people greater kind of autonomy within their own to-do lists and their work, and how do we think about what's urgent and what's important. And really those things are all motivated from what we've heard in the staff survey. So there are a ton of those kind of like mini experiments that we're running through all of those that I'm really trying to be aware of what are we learning and how are we changing the opportunities that we have for our staff to help them thrive and to be more intentional in their kind of training and development. And then we have trying to do some different learnings with PTO, and really this started from some wonderings that we've had just around pace and rhythm, and that we have a PTO policy that really does allow for flexibility, and what does that look like? And Katie was super helpful in finding that there is a report in there that in Workday that is all worker paid time off. And so if you search that, you are able to see all the time off for your team and their teams, so that you can see everyone's kind of PTO within there. And that is just a tool that we have that can help us understand PTO more, and that we're just wondering, how do we use that policy that already exists in a way that can help create more helpful rhythms for our staff, and what supports there. So some different things that we've been kind of wondering about, and I'm going to try and leave some time for questions here for all the teams. We've been still wondering about kind of compensation full benefits and how we communicate more about that. So that was a part of our compensation communication in that email. And we are still kind of experimenting and thinking about how do we give staff a greater awareness of those things. For those who didn't know, there is a total rewards in Workday that you can see for yourself and that all staff can see that can help picture their benefits, and kind of that total compensation package is available to kind of see in there, to put a numerical number on that, to understand what your 401k is, contributions, this like kind kind of total picture that can be helpful for them as just a quick little thing to say, here are those full benefits. And for some of our staff, that's really helpful. There's not maybe a greater understanding of what does insurance and benefits and all those pieces mean. So we've been wondering still, and things that we're thinking about, how do we learn? How can the CLT meeting minutes help with transparency? That is one of those pieces in that leadership shift that we're looking for. And are there different ways that we can encourage engagement with those, different ways they can be shared, different ways that questions could be answered from those that come up? So we're wondering on that one. We have been spending a good bit of time I've been wondering about, kind of the use of honorariums across camps. And we know they're being used in different camps and spaces, but it's not apples for apples across the board. But we're wondering, how are those in use in a way that really communicate value and this idea of I see you to staff in a way of when they are going, above and beyond. So have been doing, I've been having some conversations with staff that have received those for different kind of things and responsibilities. And that's been really helpful for me to see what does that communicate to staff. So and then another one that some folks, CLT Camping Services, have been wondering about was a CLT extended camp visits. Megan talked about assignment, but other different opportunities of where we're really thoughtful and intentional for staff, particularly if there's something in the summer where more intentional help is needed, or if there are kind of extenuating circumstances where it would make sense and someone comes in and fills in. So we've learned, Spindor came here for some time this summer to help in a specific capacity and need. And what are things that we learn from that connection, folks getting at camp, and where that's done with a lot of wisdom and foresight and decision making, how can that support and help our staff, and also just create more of that kind of leadership connection piece? So a lot of different things, random topics that we've been wondering about starting some conversations on. So those are 3 different groups. I now want to give us 6 minutes for some questions. If you all have questions for priorities, for the partnership group, or for the people group, I would invite Megan to be able to kind of come back up here and answer questions, and Eric, of if we have questions on some of those things that we've shared, things we've been wondering, if there's something that someone said, I would love for them to be able to answer those, and I'll answer on behalf of the people group. Micah.
Yes.
Can you describe the visual picture that you have on your slide?
Sure.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. Yep.
You're thinking about that?
Yeah, so we're trying to capture, on the left-hand side was key personas. What are the key inputs that would be involved in setting priorities for a given period of time? And when, and across the top was the time.
Year at a glance.
Correct. Yes. And so as we entertain or consider creating a strategic framework, we obviously have a great plan right now for our financial stewardship, and we have a somewhat similar document that captures certainly the timelines and the key markers. I think with the priorities, the complexity is the number of inputs. And so that's really what we're trying to expand on the left-hand side. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Other questions?
Marshall, for your camp director experiment, how many of those individuals have been camp directors before, and how many have been camp directors at SharpCon? They had all been camp directors before. 2 of them had been, nope, 1 of them had been camp director. I didn't have a camp director relationship with any of them. First time working with them.
what Marshall said, all had been camp directors before. He had not had the camp director, camp manager partnership with any of them before. They hadn't been there in his time, but one had been at Sharp Top before. Great question.
I want to make a couple of comments. I noticed on the camping services email newsletter that's coming out, this last one had a kind of a table of contents that was very helpful to be able to scan that. So I just want to affirm that. And then the department head cognito form, my department heads felt valued, seen, and I think it's a great development opportunity. Because it's causing them to kind of zoom out, even though it's from their department perspective, but to think about summer in some different ways than what they normally do. So
That's a
I
great.
would like to see that continued going forward from a national
Yeah,
place.
agree. We talked about the importance of cultivating a rhythm of reflection. That's the development opportunity. And if we could double back around to them and say, this is why we're asking you to do this. It's not another thing in your inbox. We hear it, we see it, we're going to action on it. And this is building some leadership muscles of your own.
And it's connecting leadership with the reality that staff have at camp, which was one of the feedback points too, that there's a gap there. So it's also serving a communication channel upstream and not just cascading down.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Jordan, a similar comment, when the learning catalog came out, hearing staff's perspective on all of those different classes gave me insight into what she was interested in, what she wanted to learn in, what she wanted to grow in a way that I wouldn't have had before. How do you see the response? 175 people have signed up for different classes. What are y'all learning and taking away from how many and what that might inform any of us or going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we'll kind of hit on a little bit more tomorrow. I think that it's been interesting that some of the there's been, people signing up, 175 registrations. I would say some of those are showing, new staff, which is a requirement for folks. So I think you take that back, it's like 130, which is a great kind of participation, but there's a lot of folks that still haven't signed up for anything, that are still kind of left in that. So just, wondering about that, wondering about the timeline. I would say we've seen a lot of success in the short, the 1 hour calls. The thing that was the most popular was kind of this women work and vocation, something that Alice and Megan and I are going to lead. And so curious about that. The things that we, I think haven't seen as much are the seminary options and this silent retreat option, which is, was interesting to us in terms of folks that want this spiritual formation, spiritual training. That is something that was really clear in the data, but not as many folks have signed up for. And so there's a lot that I want to learn in that of, is it the timing? It's this time of year. Is it the offering, the specific title? I'm excited for something more in the spring. But I will really affirm, Brian, that is our hope in some of those conversations, of that it is this the learning catalog is a link between a supervisor and an employee to talk about their development, to have a conversation, to know what they are interested in, where they want to grow, and having some opportunities there. And Dan and I are really open if there's something that feels like, hey, it's really missing. We want to hear from staff too and invite in of what are other opportunities that we could offer in the future. One more question, and then we're going to head to lunch if there's any more. Micah.
I don't have a connection or a question, but it's the connection that I'm making between what I heard from you, Megan, and from you, Marshall. The potential of a camp staff person being on an assignment, either for a weekend or on the summer. If I present that as a possibility to a camp director in January, we all know how often our assignments change. How often camp directors are working with their regional director SVP to find the person. But if I know of a person on the staff staff that I lead, who that's a desire of theirs and something that would be life-giving to them, and can present that as a backup plan to a camp director in January, the possibility of that coming to fruition, it goes up significantly.
For sure.
So just,
Yeah.
my mind is spinning with ideas,
Yeah.
and I'm so grateful.
And that's transformation, right? Like we're not, the adaptive capacity that we're building there is that we're not implementers or recipients or collateral damage in the lack of planning, but instead we are active collaborators, participants in the planning, in the problem solving. Significant. Okay.
We are going to have the opportunity to keep having some of these conversations after lunch as we kind of invite you all and think about different experiments and ways we can continue to test to see the change we want to see happen. Like, how do we test that? So we are going to head to lunch now, and then after lunch we'll be back in this room at 1 o'clock.